Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Priceless Podcast. My name is Michael Sechen, and this podcast is brought to you in partnership with the European Forum of LGBT Christian Groups. If you want to contribute, support this podcast or the European Forum, you can find how to do it in the podcast description, as well as some links that might come up in this podcast. So today I have a guest that was my guest already, but talking to him, I just found out how interesting many aspects of his life are, and also some of his identities that, I just had to ask more questions. So I asked him if he's willing to talk a little bit more to me. So I'm very thankful that he was. His name is Ade Adeniji. Hello, Ade, and welcome again.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me back for another conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so for all of you, if you haven't seen the first part, we're talking about LGBT mental health. We're talking about shame. It was very interesting. I forgot to mention then that I was so impressed with the images that Ade is using. So I was drawn in, and I'm inviting you to take a look and listen or look at the video, the podcast, that episode. So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your identity? How do you identify with your sexual orientation and gender?
Okay, so I'm a gay man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, you're working in the field of LGBT health. Can you say a few words about that, what you are doing?
Yeah, so I co-run a social enterprise in the UK called The Quest, and we work primarily with gay, bi, and queer men, helping them live their best lives, helping them live an integrated version of themselves, which ultimately influences the relationship they have with themselves, the relationship they have with other people, and the relationships that they have, within the communities that they might be interacting and engaging with. I also run programs based on the work of Dr. Brené Brown, who is a shame and vulnerability researcher. And so those programs are open to everyone, regardless of their sexuality or gender identity.
What is about, your religious background is also pretty interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about what your background is, our viewers and listeners?
Sure. It's multi-layered, actually. So my grandparents were Muslim. Which meant that my parents, sort of in their early years were Muslim as well. But my mom converted to Christianity. So my first introduction to, I guess, religion or faith was when I was 6.5, 7, we moved from the UK back to Nigeria, and we lived with my grandfather on my dad's side. And I remember being enchanted by the call to prayer that would happen, 5 times a day. And, we lived very close to a mosque, and sometimes he'd go to the mosque, but sometimes he'd get the mat out and come to the veranda, the balcony, and pray. And as a child, I was just really drawn to that. And I'd join him in that. And doing things like Ramadan, and where they'd be having the fasting, I'd try to fast or wake up when they were having the morning meal. But I couldn't hold my fast, during those periods. But I was enchanted by the various rituals that happened as through religion. So that was my introduction to religion. And then when we moved away from my grandfather's, one of our neighbors used to go to a Baptist church, and I just would go to church with them. So my parents were like, yeah, go, and my parents, my dad even though he was born into a Muslim world, didn't really practice. My mom at that point was a lapsed Christian, but I was just drawn to going to church with his neighbors. So I started to go to church with his neighbors. At some point, my mom started to go to church, and then I followed her to church. And so from 11 till I was 20, actually, I was actively in the church. Different church. I think the last church I went to was Pentecostal. So, I was there for the Bible studies, for the house fellowships, for Sunday school. I was hardcore. I was hardcore Christian.
Okay. And then at the end, you became an interfaith minister. Can you, first of all, explain what that means, and second of all, how? How did you decide to become an interfaith minister?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the how. I recognized that I was gay in my teens, and I still continued going to the church because it was a refuge. It was a place where I could hide. And then when I came back to the UK, I continued going to church there as well. And around about the time I started to come out, I remember going for a Sunday service. I'd gone with a friend. I wasn't really out to anyone at that point. And every so often, the pastor would preach about homosexuality being a sin. Like it would happen every so often. Anyway, on this particular Sunday, I'd gone with a friend, and the pastor was on this tirade about homosexuality being a sin. And there was this one moment where I looked across at my friend, and he looked at me, and in his eyes, I interpreted that he was saying, "What are you doing here? Like, what are you doing here?" And I never went back to that church after that. That was the last time I went back to that church. And at the same time, there was this deep yearning for not just the community that church brought, but for this connection with something bigger than myself. Like I've always felt that there is something beyond Ade. There is something, some people call it God, some people call it Allah, some people call it the universe, some people call it divine. There are different names, but there was just something that I knew, this presence that I knew. But I was really struggling as to, where do I go to allow the expression of these feelings that I'm having. Anyway, I was working for the Guardian newspapers, and we were working on introducing some initiatives on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And so I was sending out emails to some practitioners, and then one of the practitioners who responded to my email sent an email back, and the email at the footer of the email, the signature, it said, diversity consultant and interfaith minister. And I was like, interfaith minister? That sounds very interesting. So I sent this person an email just saying, "Oh, saw your email footer and I saw interfaith minister. Can you tell me what that means?" Because there was just something in the inter and the faith that just spoke. It just hit me, right in the gut. So this person responded and said, "Oh, interfaith ministry, it's a ministry that recognizes the essence of the different traditions. It honors the essence of the different traditions. And one of the metaphors that is used is there are different paths to the top of the mountain. So there are different paths." They say all roads lead to Rome. There are different roads that lead to Rome. So she sent me the details for the organization that was running the interfaith ministry, and immediately I sent an email. They had an open day. I went for the open day, and immediately I was sold. And the reason that I was sold was, for me, it spoke to the essence, like what's at the heart of all the traditions.
Yeah.
I think all the traditions have different ways of expression, different rituals in how they express, but at the core, there is a truth that all these traditions have. And that's what took me to the interfaith ministry. It was the beginning of my conscious returning home to myself. You know, it was the beginning of that conscious working on myself, actually. So at the Interfaith Seminary, I was there for 2 years, and then I stayed an additional 2 years to be a mentor. And at the seminary, we basically study the different traditions. And during the period where we're studying those traditions, we immerse ourselves into the traditions. So I remember when we were studying Judaism, for instance, observing Shabbat. You know, when we were studying Islam, you know, finding time 5 times a day to center and connect with our essence and the God of our understanding. You know, visiting places of worship for the different traditions. And it was with a view to, connecting with that truth. Like, what are they saying? What are they saying at their core? What are they saying at their core? So when I think of Christianity, you know, I think of Jesus, and I think of, you know, Jesus's love. You know, I think of things like, you know, love thy neighbor as yourself. You know, I think of things like, you know, turning the other cheek. I think of, the taking out that sort of, you know, being mindful of focusing on the neighbor as opposed to ignoring, you know, what's in our own eye. So that's what took me to the Interfaith Seminary. It was part of my search for this space of connecting with something bigger than myself.
Let's go a little bit more into your history of, you know, you grew up in a surrounded by the Muslim tradition also. How is it to, you know, accept yourself as a gay man? I mean, a big part of your family is still Muslim. So how do you see that there are any differences? Well, of course, how was it for you? That's my major question.
Challenging. So, I mean, there is the religion, but then there's also the culture. So, you know, within Nigeria, it's certainly not acceptable to be gay, even though there are loads of people who are. But it's seen as a taboo. It's seen as something that brings shame on the family. And so there is that sort of the cultural aspect. And in terms of religion, it's certainly frowned upon a lot. And what's starting to happen more and more is individuals are starting to own their truth and say, hey, look, I can love God, I can love Allah and still be openly gay, be openly lesbian, be openly bi, be trans. For myself, it was very challenging because my family did struggle with it. It was seen as a sin. It was seen as unacceptable. It was seen as problematic. But it's difficult to answer with, was that religion or was that culture? Because the two things are so interwoven with each other, actually. But it was challenging. I mean, in terms of the Muslim faith, my grandparents were already dead by the time I came out. My father was no longer alive when I came out, so I didn't really get anyone on the Muslim side throwing religion at me. That didn't really happen. It was more the culture. Like, this is not something people in our culture do. In fact, I remember my mom saying to me, you know, black people are not gay. This is something that white people are, you know. Why are you gay? There are no black people who are gay. This is a white person's issue. This is not for you. And I suspect that there probably were other family members who felt the same way as well.
When did you move to London? When did you come back from Nigeria?
So we moved to London. Sorry, we moved to Nigeria when I was 6.5 going on 7. And then I moved back when I was 19.
So, yeah, being a black gay man, I mean, that's already what they call, how do they call this, where different identities meet. Intersectionality, exactly. So how was that whole experience for you coming back 19? I mean, those are still very formative years as a gay black man. Yeah.
I mean, living in Nigeria, I never came across any other gay people. It just wasn't something that was part of my reality at that particular point in time. And so for me, there was this thing around, when I come to the UK, I'm going to be able to be myself. I'm going to be able to be myself. And I remember a couple of months of arrival in the UK, we went to visit a family friend. And I overheard the family friend saying to my uncle, "Oh, you better watch out that Ade doesn't start following men because they're going to be after him." And I remember thinking, "Oh, they're going to be after me. Where do I go for them to be after me? Like, like where is this place? I can still picture, hearing that conversation of, you better protect him because the men are going to be after him." Even though I'd not come out, I'd not come out to anyone, but there were signs. I mean, people knew, or people suspected that I was, and I think this person who had said that probably saw something in me to make her say that. But I didn't come out, So I came to the UK when I was 19. I didn't come out till I was 27. In fact, going back to the church scenario, I just remembered a situation. So when I got back, I was looking for the right church to go to, and on a particular day, I was on my way to work. So I think it was probably a few months of arrival. Actually, I was on my way to work. There was a guy on the tube reading the Bible, and we got talking, and he's like, "Oh, I go to this particular church." And so I started going to this guy's church, actually. I started going to this guy's church. And there was this particular day, and then he'd have like Bible groups, Bible study at his home, and I'd go for Bible study. And on this particular day, I was getting ready to leave his place. And so I was by the door, and I stretched, and he was behind me, and he started massaging my shoulders. And it's the first time as an adult that a man had actually touched me. And I remember going into work on the Monday and saying to colleagues, "Oh, I went to Bible study with this guy and he was massaging my shoulders," like not even thinking anything like gay or anything about it. But I remember them like looking at me like, "Oh, that's really strange." But I wasn't even putting two and two together. But my uncle, who I was living with, he did, because this guy used to phone me up a lot. And I remember my uncle saying, I don't like him calling you. I don't like him calling you. I need him to stop calling you." And then on a particular day, this guy had called. I didn't want to speak to him. So I told my uncle to pick up the phone and say that I'm not home. And then my uncle just said, "Look, don't ever call this place ever again." But yeah, I mean, there were these sort of things that were there. There was, gay stuff was in my face, but because I was so deep in the closet that I just did not even see it around me. I just did not see, I was so caught up in shame. I was so caught up in, like not just who would want me, but I can't even allow myself to be in a space where someone would want me, because that would just open up this sense that I'm not good enough. So I was completely hidden, completely buried. I didn't come out till I was 27. And the reason that I did come out was, my dad died when I was 27, 26 going on 27. And when he died, there was something that clicked within me, where I suddenly thought I never showed up as my authentic self with him.
Yeah. Like
he just never got to know me. And I'd never thought about that before his death. I'd never thought, "Oh, we're not having an authentic relationship." Because even though we had challenges in our relationship, there was a lot of pain in our relationship. he would call me, he'd call me from Nigeria. We'd speak on the phone about stuff, all the surface stuff. And he'd always ask me, how are you doing? And I would always find ways to deflect it, but I just never told him. And so when he died, I just kind of thought, oh, it's so sad that I just never showed up. And so I made a promise to myself that I was going to come out. I was going to come out to my mum, who was still alive at the time. And I was going to come out to family members. And so that was kind of like the beginning of my conscious journey in terms of coming to terms with my sexuality.
And how did that go, coming out to your family?
It happened. It happened. It happened. It was painful. It was very, very painful. So with my mum, she struggled with it, did not accept it, felt it was an abomination. She felt it was something for white people. Really, really struggled with it. With family members, family members struggled with it. There was one uncle who said to someone in the family he didn't want me hanging around with his kids because he felt I might abuse them. It was very, very painful. There is this metaphor of leaving the pale. So the pale is this enclosure where they would normally have sheep, cattle, and to leave the pale is very confronting for the person who is leaving the pale and for the people who are left within the pale. So, as human beings, many of us want to be within that pale of belonging, connection. No one wants to leave. No one wants to be disloyal to the pale. And that's why, many of us stay in situations where it might not necessarily be healthy, but it's within this enclosure of safety, however we might define safety. And so to come out takes tremendous courage, to come out and own our truth does take tremendous courage. And for me, I think where I got to was I owe it to myself to live my authentic life. Like I knew that, like, I don't owe it to my father, to my mother. I owe it to Ade. I need to show up for Ade. I need to honor Ade. And so that was why, I made that decision to come out to my mom. It was painful. We didn't speak for a number of years, actually. And then when we started speaking, it was almost like the conversation never happened. And she's like, oh, so when are you going to get married? When are you going to have children? And I'm like, duh, we've been here before. So she went into this complete denial. And I know the many Nigerian gay men, bi men, lesbians that I speak to who go through this. The many black men, lesbians, bi, who go through this as well. I'm certainly not unique with this particular story. But yeah, it was very painful. But I tell you what, I have no regrets, actually, because what it's meant for me is it simply meant that I am showing up for myself, showing up for myself. I am honoring myself. I'm standing to the best of my ability in my truth. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing this with us. What is the situation like now with your family, also with you?
Yeah, it's better. I mean, my younger cousins, much more embracing than their parents. Yeah, my mom passed away in 2012. She still struggled with it. I mentioned earlier on that we resumed contact, but then I broke off contact again because she was it just wasn't very healthy, the interactions we were having. But what was very interesting was when I went for her funeral, I went to see the pastor, going back to church. I went to see the pastor of her church. Now, the pastor of her church is the church I used to go to before I left Nigeria. Well, no, I used to go to his church when I was in my teens, up until maybe I was about 17. And then I went to another church. But in my formative teen years, I went to that particular church. So I know the pastor. And one of the first things he said to me was, "You're responsible for your mother's death." Because your mother was very unhappy with who you were. And that's what killed her. And at the funeral, which was a Christian funeral, the person who was doing the prayers, every so often would say, "Well, I hope the son," so I'm my mom's only child, and he said, "Well, I hope the son does that thing that his mother wanted him to do." And that was the prayer. And I remember the pastor's wife saying, "Your mom's not going to rest in peace until you get married to a woman." So a lot of this goes back to a lot of the wounding that can still happen within churches, actually. And I think, for myself, what I'm recognizing is that it was important for me to build my own inner resources so that I'm able to stand in my own truth. I'm able to be in my own truth. Because I think in my teens, when I was still on that hunt for my refuge, that place of belonging, I was sacrificing my authenticity because I wanted to belong.
Yeah.
So I'd be like, "Okay, I know you love me, but you don't love my sexuality. So when I'm with you, I just won't be gay. I just won't, bring anything that you might perceive as gay into this circle." And I just got to that place of recognizing that does me a disservice. That is not good for my own mental health. That is not good for my own mental well-being. I need to stand in my own truth.
Wow, when you told the story, I just remembered how much I feared. Actually, it didn't happen to me, but I feared when my dad died, because he died about a year after I came out, and I feared that someone will say it's your fault. And I guess, that it was, not that I guess, I know it was a question of mine. Do I have any fault in this? And there are so many LGBT people actually struggling, because one of the most painful things is actually not being accepted by your own family, or even rejected or ignored. What helped you? How did you gain the strength to go to work on this pain, to go off? Yeah, to come out of this pain as, someone that doesn't allow pain to take over, but, to still have some kind of control. I mean, pain is not a bad thing necessarily, but, sometimes it can become overwhelming. What helped you? And there are so many people that are struggling with this question. Is there anything that you can give as a suggestion, let's say, to people who are afraid of this pain, maybe, or going through this pain?
Yeah. I mean, different things helped me at different times. So I think of someone who is trying to learn to ride a bicycle. They might start riding the bicycle with the trainer wheels, with a small bicycle. And at some point they go, "Oh, I've outgrown that bicycle. I'm going to get another bicycle." So there were different things that helped. Some of them were friends. And some of those friends are no longer part of my life because we outgrew each other. But one of the things that I recognized when I came out was I wanted to bring my truth into the light. And it was important for me to share my truth with people. So one of the things I did actually was I set a target of coming out to one person a week. And that was for me, because one of the things I recognized for myself was, if it was going to be so painful, I could so easily go back to the closet. Like I knew that for a fact. Like I could so easily go back, because I wanted to be loved by my parents. I wanted to be loved by my mom. My mom's only child, and I wanted to, I was her golden boy when I was growing up. So I wanted to be in that place of belonging. And so I recognized that there was a high chance that I could go back into the closet. Because my mom, after I came out, was like, look, you can still be with a woman. In fact, the pastor who said to me, you killed your mom, one of the things he said to me is, what we'd like you to do is marry a woman and have a child. We know you've got a partner, but yeah, you just have a woman and just do it that way. Just navigate the two. So I knew that there was a chance that I could go down that road. So one of the things that I wanted to do was have enough people out there who knew that Ade was gay. So if they saw Ade getting married to a woman, they'd be like, "Oi, what's going on here?" So that was one of the things that I did. In the year that I came out, I also was a steward on Pride. So I was one of the people who was, looking after the crowd. So I just really went out there and did a lot to be with other gay people. That was really important for me, to go out there and make sure that I know at a core level that there are other people out there like me who are navigating their own sets of challenges and moments of liberation. And so I tried my best to make sure that field was also diverse. So not just, white gay men, but black gay men. And there were lesbians as well who were also part of those formative years of me coming out. So I think community is what really helped me, building that community, which in a way, in those early years of coming out, was almost like a surrogate family. So there was this space that I could fall back on. In fact, I remember when I came out to my mom that first time, she was staying with me. And I remember going to work the next day. And when I got home, she was still dressed in her nightgown. She'd not left the apartment, and she looked very miserable. And I remember saying to her, have you spoken to anyone about what we talked about? And she said, no, I can't tell anyone this. This is shameful. I can't tell anyone. I remember saying to her, look, I've got people I can talk to. So in fact, before I came out to my mom, I'd already started to cultivate this alternative family who would be there for me. So I said to her, look, you need to talk to someone because I've got people that I can talk with and share what's going on for me. It's really important for you to talk to someone. So, I would say that's really, important to have that community. And then the other thing that I did, which came much later, was storytelling. I love telling stories, and you probably can tell from our conversation. But one of the things I did in, I think it was 2015, 2016, I did a one-man show, which was on in the UK and in the Netherlands, and it was called Killing My Mother. So it was me on stage for 50 minutes where I shared a variety of stories around the journey with my mother. And I tell you, the number of people who would come up to me at the end of that show, men, women of different ethnicities and races, who'd be like, wow, I can relate to so many aspects of what you've just shared. And so for me, the reason that I was doing that, again, it goes back to, shining a light on the shame. By telling the stories, I was able to dispel that pain. So even talking to you now, there might be some people who are listening and it's maybe activating old wounds, like, maybe around their father, their mother coming out. But as I share the story for myself, yes, I feel sad that was the case, but there is no residue that's lingering. I can tell the story as a story. And I think that's only happened because I've told the story so many times. And through each time I tell the story, there's a healing that happens for myself and hopefully for the person who is listening to the story as well.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this, for sharing your story and your pain with us. And as you said, yeah, I really enjoy your storytelling part. I told you that I really enjoy the images that you use, and they're so vibrant. So it's not very hard to connect with you and with what you are saying, because you're just, yeah, I don't know. We have this, I don't know the word in English, when something is plastic, you're giving it like plasticism. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Something that you can touch it and feel it.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry,
Nice
you're making it into
texture.
a 3D. Yeah. I'm inventing new words. So English speaking people, I'm so sorry. Well, if you want to know a little bit more about shame, I invite you again to listen to the first part of this podcast where Ade is talking about shame and how we can also deal with it and work on it, and that it's a normal part of our life. I don't know if you're willing to tell our viewers and listeners about your life situation right now. Where are you at as a gay man?
Where I'm at, I am. Oh, that's such a interesting question. I am happy. I'm happy. I feel really, really privileged, actually. The fact that I co-run this organization that works with gay, bi, queer men. I feel really honored that co-creating spaces where gay, bi, queer men can come and share their stories. These are the sort of communities that I was looking for when I came out, that wasn't available. So it's such a privilege, such an honor to be in those spaces. I got married 2 years ago to a lovely man, and so again, that's also wonderful. I think the 19-year-old me that left Nigeria could never have imagined that one day he'd get married to a man. So that feels really special. I've got such wonderful images of the ceremony just sort of stamped in my brain. And one of the things I shared at that ceremony was, in many parts of the world, gay men, lesbians cannot get married, and I stand there in recognition of that. And so, there was an acknowledgement that needed to happen that, I'm enjoying this privilege, that there's still so many that are not able to enjoy it. I'm sat here talking to you as an out, black gay man. There are many black gay men who are not able to sit in a space like this and have this kind of conversation for many reasons. Some of them to do with what's going on in their families, in their churches, in their mosques, what's going on in the country in terms of legislation. So I really want to honor and acknowledge that as well, that whilst, I've had challenges in terms of my own journey, there are many out there who are still having to navigate those challenges. And I don't believe that any of us are free until all of us are free. As long as there is one LGBTQIA person out there who is being shamed, being ridiculed, being othered for their sexuality and gender identity, none of us are truly free. Because it has an impact on all of us to a different degree, but it has an impact. So this is a collective issue for all of us, not just people who are LGBTQ, because we are people's children, we're people's brothers, we're sisters, we're uncles, we're aunties. So it's not just about us; it has an impact on the families as well. And those people need to be standing up more and more as allies to say, we've got you. We've got you.
Yes. Yes. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for being with us, not only for one part, but for two parts. And, you know, where most people do 1 hour, you did almost two with me. Thank you for agreeing to do both parts and for sharing your story. You know, I always say it's for me when someone is telling me his or her story or their story. First of all, I'm honored, you know, because I'm the one who can ask the questions and talk to the people and get to know you even on a different level, you know, in between the breaks too. And also, you know, it's just like a gift when people are telling their story. I always imagine receiving this beautiful gift that I just want to handle with care and with so much thankfulness. So thank you so much for all the images, for the stories you told, for your life you shared. Thank you, dear viewers and listeners, for being with us. As I already mentioned, this podcast is made in partnership with the European Forum. The links, we mentioned some things in the first part when I talked to Ade, where you can also find him online, or the quest where you can find online. So there are a lot of links that you can check out. Please visit the podcast description and check out the links. Yeah, if you want to support this podcast or the European Forum, you can find it there too. So yeah, this is it for today. Thank you all for being here, and see you in a week for our next episode. Until then, bye everyone.
Thank you for having me.